The broadcast is live. Good evening, all. And I don't know if Daisy's joining us or not. She ended up going up to. I sent her an invite just in case she may join us. Who knows?
You could have told her to just leave the camera on. The dogs would walk by.
She's up in Maine at her mother's, I think.
It seems like everybody I know is in Maine this week. There's another friend of mine that lives in New York. She's in Maine. I just got some photographs from a friend of mine down in Atlanta, and him and his wife are vacationing in Maine. I was like, did I miss like the main attraction? You know.
She's also visiting some friends of ours who are from New Jersey who are vacationing up in Maine this week.
Well, if I was in New Jersey, I'd probably want to be in Maine too.
What do you do in Maine?
Eat a lot.
You see the ocean?
Yeah. And you eat Maine lobster cheaper than it is anywhere else.
Well, I have cheap lobster. I have ocean. I don't need to go to Maine.
As far as I know, Maine is about the woods and the seashore, and those are the two things that Maine are about.
I might be wrong, but if I'm mistaken, I think Maine doesn't have any snakes either.
I have no idea about that.
I could be wrong about that, but it seems
did St. Patrick drive them all out?
That's a myth.
Black-eyed pea, cucumber, and bell pepper. That's the salad. Well, we know who the bell pepper is. That's Paolo.
Mm-hmm. What were the other two choices after? Was it black-eyed pea, and what was the other one?
Cucumber.
Cucumber and bell pepper and black-eyed pea.
Okay.
Well, I like cucumbers the best to eat out of those three, so.
I actually like them the least.
You don't like cucumbers?
Oh, they're okay. I don't dislike them, but of those three, I like the other two better.
Of those three, I'd go cucumber, bell pepper. I'm not even sure if I've ever had black-eyed peas.
I think I tried it once.
They're okay. It's a very standard thing, to be honest.
Yeah, I've had plenty of green peas, pea pods. I'm not sure I've ever had black-eyed peas.
I've had black-eyed peas, but boy, it's been a long time since I've had them.
Bell peppers are good barbecued.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, roasted or
I like bell peppers.
So do I.
Put them in my chili.
So do I.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had something that we call alheira. Mind the Comics knows what it is. It's a sausage made of game and fowl. And it was created by crypto Jews running from the Inquisition just so they could pass for Christians by eating a sausage.
Oh.
So did anybody expect it?
Well, it was tasty, so...
Because nobody expects the Inquisition.
Well, they were expecting the Inquisition, so here's a sausage.
So they had to pretend they weren't Jews.
Yeah.
Hello, Terrence.
Evening, Terrence. Comic crack.
Actually, that sounds good. I'd try that.
I'm going to have to see if I can share my screen tonight. How do we do that again? Bum, bum, bum. There's solo layout. Where is share screen? Somewhere in here.
Is that formatted different now on the new computer?
I'm still on my old laptop, so.
Gotcha.
But I remember sharing. Oh, there's share. Share screen. Okay. I just want to see that is because just before I got on, I decided to come up with some read, rip, and slabs. And my theme was Marvel 1968. Because I was like, let's get in on some of those, new books, the number ones and stuff that Marvel put out in 1968. Mm-hmm. But holy cow, are there a lot of covers that are good from I never looked because I've been to Mike's Amazing World of Comics where you can look at what was on the newsstand each month. It's a great website. It's a great resource if you want to see what comics were on the newsstand in May of 1968. You just put that information in and it shows you.
That was the month before I was born.
Especially because he has the actual release dates, not just the cover dates, so you can know what actually was on the newsstand.
Right. So I decided I was going to go to Mike's Amazing World of Comics and see which first issues were out in 1968, because that was the year where Marvel got a new distributor and they didn't have to do split books anymore. And, Iron Man #1 came out, Hulk got his own book, Doctor Strange got his own book. But the amount of good covers that came out from Marvel in 1968 was amazing. Led by Steranko, of course. I didn't realize that was the year Steranko was doing a lot of covers. Yeah. He was doing covers for S.H.I.E.L.D. He was doing covers for Captain America. He was doing covers for the X-Men. So it was like, wow, there were a lot of good covers out.
Steranko was kind of like Jimi Hendrix in that he had a lot of good output, but it was just within a few years.
Yeah. It was amazing to me. And there was like a lot of good Romita covers, a lot of good John Buscema covers, a lot of good Marie Severin covers on the Hulk.
It's a lot of good everything, huh?
I was like, wow, there was just a lot of good covers in 1968.
Right.
Covers that have been copied over and over and over.
Sure.
I was just amazed by it. So just before we get on here, I made up the list. I was like, you know what? I should put together a file of
cover images
of the covers so we can look at them and decide and read, rip, and tear. Let me see if I can do that here. Okay. If I share screen sharing tips. Alrighty, let's share window, that window, share. There we go. It's sharing it. There's our first read, rip, and slab. Those 3 covers, all from 1968. We got Silver Surfer, #4. What issue of the Hulk is that? 10, I don't even know. 104 or something like that. That's in Thor 154. What is it? Hulk 105. That's a Marie Severin cover. Of course, a John Buscema on the Silver Surfer and a Kirby on the Thor. Oh. Which one would you read? Which one would you rip? And which one would you slab?
Read Thor, slab Silver Surfer, rip Hulk.
Ripping the Hulk.
Yes.
I would tend to agree with Paolo.
I'm just not that interested in in that particular phase of the Hulk. Thor is good because Kirby's still there. I don't need to read Silver Surfer. It's just a fight comic, but it's a great cover, so I can slab it and put it up on the wall.
Yeah, that's actually what I was thinking too.
Sorry, Marie Severin.
There's a lot of good Marie Severin covers from that. Because I was thinking, I would slab the cover I liked best, kind of thing.
The problem is, I only start liking the Hulk when he gets to the 80s, after Len Wein.
I actually like that Silver Surfer cover the least.
Really?
Hey, what happened to StreamYard? There we go. All of a sudden, it switched back to it switched me back to the Photoshop file, and I couldn't see StreamYard. I think I would slab that Hulk cover. Oh God, then I have to read the Silver. Now I don't have to tear up that Silver Surfer and read Thor.
Really?
Yeah.
I just have less interest in the Hulk than I do the other two. So that's
the Hulk was my childhood favorite. Let's see if I hit stop sharing now. All right, it goes back.
That's the Hulk Surfer cover. It's full of action. That's exactly the type of art that you want in a superhero comic.
I never liked that cover much. I mean, not that I think it's bad or anything. Right. It just never... It seems a little cut and paste to me. The figures aren't really interacting. They're both kind of just posing. And they're like posing in a fight. They're fight posing. It just never struck me, I mean, I'm not going to tell you it's bad, and I do like it. It just was never one of my favorites.
Fight posing was very, very common back then. Still is too.
And you can tell that it's at that stage that John Buscema was absorbing Kirby's style and incorporating it into his own art style.
Oh yeah, that's early Buscema. You can tell.
Yeah,
he likes it because I think those poses are very Kirby, and the composition is kind of a little Kirby, but not really. It's an interesting cut. Like I said, I can remember when that cover first got really popular on YouTube. I don't know, 5, 6, because it was kind of never really popular before, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years ago. I mean, it wasn't unpopular, but I never saw it much. But then I remember there was a time on YouTube when all of a sudden everybody started liking that cover. And now the price on that cover is through the roof too. I mean, that's I
remember seeing that cover in reference books.
Yeah, it was always
for the internet.
But I don't think it was anyone's favorite.
It's hard.
I think it's like I said, the comic collector. I think in the era, I don't know when it started. In this era we're in of variant covers and people who buy lots of comics just for their covers. I think when that era started, that cover started getting really popular. Now it's a key issue just because of the cover. I mean that's I think that the price on that is probably second only to Silver Surfer #1. Probably even goes for more in some. I don't know.
Well, #3 is first Mephisto.
Okay.
So that's probably worth a bit more right now.
Has Marvel not yet thrown a gay pride parade over Bifrost, the bridge? I don't think they have. But sooner or later. But all three of those covers. All three of those covers came out in 1968. There was 3 good covers. Now let me show you. And just picking, I couldn't pick just 3 Steranko covers. So I've got 2 Steranko. I've got a Steranko Shield version and a Steranko other. Let's go. Let's see what we got here. This is the Steranko Other edition. We'll share the screen. Window. Share. There we go. Those 3 covers all came out in 1968. And that's X-Men 50. X-Men 39 probably didn't come out in 68. That's X-Men 50. That's the famous Polaris cover. Right. We've got the Captain America cover, and of course that Hulk annual cover has just been swiped so many times. And there's other good Captain America covers too.
Yeah.
So which one? How are you going to do that? Which one would you read? Which one would you rip? And which one would you slab? Here, Comic Crack's got rip Cap, read Hulk, and slab the X-Men.
Not for me. Yeah. I would read Captain America. I would slab the Hulk, and I'd rip the X-Men.
I might go in that order.
I would read the Hulk, slab the Cap, and rip the X.
2 X-Men rips. Who was it? Was Roy Thomas writing the X-Men then?
I have no idea.
I think it's Arnold Drake at this.
Okay, this is right before the Neil Adams era when it got good.
Because Arnold, whoops,
oops,
we lost our host. Yeah, Arnold Drake was at Marvel for some time in 68, 69. I think it was after they canceled the Doom Patrol.
I got kicked out of my own stream.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, those are just like 3 random. Those don't even count the Shield Steranko covers. Yep, bye for a moment, but now I'm back.
I think I want to read that Hulk because it's the first time that we get the impression that not everything is good in the kingdom of Denmark, or more like in Atlan. Up until then, we had Maximus, which was the typical "oh, I hate my brother because he's the king." But now there are more Inhumans who don't like the old system. And I think that's important to establish Atlan as a real city with real people. So I would read that.
I just realized my new computer was still uploading things, so I decided to turn that off. That could have caused me to kick out.
Awesome.
But yeah, here's some stuff that didn't even have cover. That I didn't even put covers together because these are like more Marvel 1968 stuff. We've got you got to choose between these three: Reed, Rip, and Slab. Shield #1, Submariner #1, and Silver Surfer #1. Shield, Submariner, and Silver Surfer.
I would Slab Shield #1. I would read Silver Surfer, and I'd rip up Submariner.
Someone wants Paolo's mic turned up a little bit.
Yeah, I flipped the switch here. Maybe it's better now.
Oh yeah,
I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Yo. Shield #1, Submariner #1, and Silver Surfer #1.
Yeah, I'd read Silver Surfer. I would Slab Shield, and I would rip up Submariner.
Yeah.
I don't want to read Silver Surfer #1. That's for sure. I've read it before, and it's not very good.
Oh, and I was watching a live stream a couple of days ago from the Nerd Herd. They're a group of UK YouTubers, and they were reviewing the trade with the first 5 issues of the Silver Surfer, and they were really ripping into Stan Lee's writing style.
I'm getting sound breaking up on me again.
Even I mocked it a little. You know, one thing that you always had in those Silver Surfers were within the first 3 pages, the Silver Surfer would be staring into somewhere, going, "I am trapped in this planet of mad people who cannot see the beauty of the universe. I must return to Zenla so I can finally be reunited with my greatest love, Shalabal."
Isn't there a Silver Surfer animation in that? Huh. Oh, shallow. My friend Buncho used to say, "Oh, shallow gal. I cannot believe I lost you, shallow gal."
But from
I
every
actually
description
got a graphic novel this week.
Mm-hmm.
Something I haven't seen. Be along the. Here's the. Right, it's graphic novel size, so it's like, you know, a magazine. I haven't seen anything out like in this format from someone other than those DC Black labels in a while. This is a Aftershock book, a one-shot. I think it's about 48 pages, $7 by Peter Milligan and Peter Kowalski, who is. Peter Milligan, we know he's been a writer of comics for a while. Yeah. Peter Kowalski started his professional career in France and Belgium. But since his output has grown to 130 U.S. issues. So, must be from Poland, but who knows. But I really enjoyed this.
Interesting cover.
Are you guys saying something? There we go.
I said it's
right. My sound is acting up, so I wasn't sure. Let me leave and come back and see if my sound gets better.
Okay.
Okay. Piotr Kowalski, born in 1973.
There we go.
Stable now.
How's my? One of these days I'm going to hook this laptop up to Ethernet and see how that works. Because I'm on wireless and this sun is
direct connection is always better.
Usually my connection is fine, but some of these nights, when my sound starts breaking up and it starts kicking me out.
Kowalski's French comics look pretty good here.
Yeah. What's really interesting is in looking at this stuff. Let me see if I can.
I've seen this. It's that Dracula series. Yeah.
It really reminds me of sort of a cross between older P. Craig Russell and Mike Mignola, which is a weird cross. Because he's got a very sort of illustrative style.
Right.
But he's got some Mike Mignola shadow work in there, too.
It might not be as weird as you think because Craig Russell inks some Mike Mignola stuff. So.
Yeah.
Well, he's a big fan of Torgal artist Rosinski, which I can see, too.
But it was it's the story of a kid in, I think it's the 19th century in England. And he's got epilepsy, and his father's a preacher who thinks he's possessed by a demon, and his mother's trying to get him to a doctor. And it's just this, the story of this poor tortured little kid.
Right.
And it's called The God of Tremors, because they're rich in this sort of big estate. And in this big estate is this, here we go, is this idol. And it's you kind of really don't know and this idol talks to him and tries to get him to do things. But the little kid's a Christian and doesn't want to. But you really don't know if the whole idol thing is real or not. It very well could be. Gotcha. But you could also go, maybe he was just hallucinating that part. But I just had a lot of fun reading sort of a good comic that has nothing to do with any other comic. It's like it's been so long since I've read a graphic novel of any kind that wasn't part 1 of whatever or part 3 of whatever. It's just kind of its own thing, and I really enjoyed it. That's
good.
It's nice. Love the paintings in back there. Yeah, they're my paintings. Someday I'm gonna have to do a show on them. I really love to flip through the Silver Surfer, though. Yeah, I've heard the same thing. Have you guys ever flipped through? Matter of fact, I don't know if I've ever flipped through it. The artist edition of the Silver Surfer. Have you guys seen that?
No.
Oh,
I have several artist edition books, but I don't have any Silver Surfer.
You can imagine how good it is.
Yeah.
I can't remember if I made I don't have it, but I think I made a video of a friend, so I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the artist edition format.
They're so nice. Have you ever seen the littler ones, the artisan editions?
Yes.
I've never seen one of those.
It's just shrunk down to a smaller format.
Right.
So it's an affordable version.
Right, much more affordable.
It doesn't have the same impact as seeing
the
huge original size. But if you can't get one of those or you can't afford it or whatever, then it's a decent substitute.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's how I got the Rocketeer.
The Artisan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just couldn't afford the. I don't even remember how much it cost, but I remember it was a lot. And the Artisan edition was going for $40.
Right.
Yeah. I did I get the no? My friend Ed got the Rocketeer. I think those were in the early days of artist editions too.
That's
when I bought
the first artist edition.
Yeah, that's when I bought all my artist editions are from I don't know what year it came out, 2012. From 2012 to 2015 is when I bought all my artist editions.
Yeah, I was lucky and got a copy of the Wally Wood artist edition at cover price.
Yeah. Only 2 artist edition dangerous format. I'd like to get the Wolverton one. Yeah, that one's nice.
Dangerous for your wallet.
But what was funny about, I remember looking through my friend Ed's Rocketeer one. He bought that one early on. And it was funny because he had, especially at the end of the artist edition, he had guys helping him out. Yeah. So all of a sudden, there's a Jaime Hernandez page or 2. And there's no mistake in the Jaime Hernandez women. They look like his Love and Rockets women. It's whoa.
Yeah,
Jaime Hernandez in the middle of Dave Stevens.
He had them helping him out. He had Sandy Plunkett. He had Mike Kaluta.
Yeah.
There's a couple other people that I can't remember right off the top of my head, but there's a list somewhere of people he had to help him out.
I wonder if that goes on anymore, because I was just I think I mentioned it last week. If you want to see some parts of comic history, Ralph Reese has been writing sort of his autobiography on Facebook,
right?
Where he just writes about he was at Continuity Studios in the 70s, and he just writes about it, and other people who were there chime in, and this and that, and those guys were always helping each other out. Guys whose names we don't even know. He helped on that, on this, he helped on that. I wonder if that's in this day and age of so many artists from Marvel and DC not even being in the U.S. I don't know how much help they get with anything.
It's almost ironic in that it would be easier to help somebody these days digitally and just transfer the files. But, back then, what would you guess that over 90% of the artists lived within probably a 2-hour radius from New York City?
Yeah. Yeah. And they had studios together.
Yeah.
Where's the Kaluta Starstruck movie?
I can just see Mike rolling his eyes at that now. No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, because all those guys who worked at Continuity Studios together would help each out on jobs. That's how, Neil Adams ended up working unofficially on the Superman Spider-Man crossover.
And plus, all the artists back then knew each other personally, too.
Yeah. Dave Stevens, Rocketeer. See,
it's up there.
I love the artwork, but I was never a huge fan of the story. Though I do have that, which the 10 years ago they put out an edition of Rocketeer with Laura Martin colors.
Is that the slipcase?
That's very nice. What was that?
Is that one in a slipcase? I
think so. Yeah. It's a hardcover and I was never a huge fan of slipcases. Dave Siemens, right? Yeah, I don't remember anything about the story of the story. Never grabbed me, but Dave Stevens' art sure did.
Well, basically, the story is just the Rocketeer finds a
jetpack.
I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but he finds a jetpack that belongs to a very famous character that you don't really recognize right off the bat. So
yeah, I don't even remember it belonging to a famous character.
It does.
I remember not seeing
it. Yeah, both stories are about famous characters.
And then you get to see a character that's based on Rondo Hatton. So how can that be a bad thing?
How many issues of the Rocketeer were there in total? It's only a couple of hundred pages.
4?
Yeah. The thing is, the Rocketeer had its own magazine,
right?
But most of the stories were published in backups in other titles.
Right. And then, years later, you had a 3-issue mini-series of the Rocketeer Adventure magazine.
At IDW or something? I know Bob Wycheck.
Dark Horse, maybe?
Yeah, Bob Wycheck inked some issues over somebody. I can't remember
which
ones. I cannot remember.
I'm a big fan of the Rocketeer as well.
I am more of a fan of Dave Stevens' artwork than I am of Rocketeer.
I like both. I mean, it's like him and Steranko probably had as big of an impact on comics with a tiny body of work compared to anybody else.
Michael Golden would be in that category.
Mike's got a bigger body of work, though. It's not as huge as some other people, but
it's not that big. I mean, it might be bigger than Dave Stevens and Steranko.
It's bigger than those two, is what I'm getting at. But yeah,
but it's not that. It's not. Right. It's not as big as your average his influence outstrips his work, and the number of work he's done.
I can see that.
But you'll find Michael Golden around in a lot of comics. If you're not looking, you're going to find him.
Yeah.
I think Golden, you definitely had a lot more than Steranko and Dave Stevens. I'm not sure if he reached the same number of pages as Paul Chadwick.
Like, Steranko had a lot of pages in the late 80s and early 90s that we pay no attention to. That's when he came back from comics and did some stuff, and I couldn't even tell you how many pages he did because I paid no attention to it.
Well, Golden also did a lot of the NAM series too, which a lot of people.
That's right. Once again, a series that doesn't get a lot of attention paid to it because it's not a superhero.
And then later on, he did the Jackie Chan Adventures.
Oh yeah, he did that with Renee. Renee Witterstatter made him do that.
Right.
Michael Golden did most of that.
Do what?
Michael Golden did a lot of issues. Well, not a lot. He did plenty of issues too, but of stuff that we pay no attention to. We pay more attention to his cover. It's like when I think of Michael Golden, I think of the Micronauts.
Right.
Which was a long time ago. I think of that one G.I. Joe issue that I didn't know existed, except every G.I. Joe fan, it was their favorite issue.
Right.
I think of some of the covers he did after that in the 90s, too.
There was a run of covers he did, like 5 or 6 of them for Detective Comics.
Yeah.
They're beautiful. I think Mike Kaluta has one of the originals of those. They're just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, Mazzucchelli didn't do a whole lot of pages, but he's had some graphic novels since then, but not a ton.
Right. Yeah.
Micronauts. What I heard, I have no idea how true this is. This is just the story I heard about Mazzucchelli, is that he made so much money off of Batman Year One that he just collected royalties and was a musician for a while. So he just was like a road musician kind of touring.
Right.
Rather have an artist edition of Russ Heath Tank or Sea Devils.
Yes.
Haunted Tank because his tanks were cool.
Either one, either the two are fine. Both would be better. Yeah. Any Russ Heath art's good.
Yeah.
Just have this one very iconic image burned in my brain of Russ Heath where he did a German Tiger tank that's just fantastic.
That's the one they show whenever they mention Russ Heath.
Right.
Spain Rodriguez Artist Edition. I have not read that much Spain Rodriguez, just a little.
I've read just a little.
I don't see his stuff very often. He was one of those underground comics guys who came by the end of the 70s was a little bit above ground even. But
Jack Jackson will be interesting too.
Oh, speaking of artists, not comic book artists though. I think I just mentioned him last week, but Chuck Close died.
I saw that on Facebook the other day.
Yeah, the famous painter. Can't remember if it was here I was talking about it or somewhere else, but his grid and gridding things up and this and that, because I was just gridding up that that painting that I showed on my weekly haul. I used a grid to transfer the drawing, but yeah.
Jared, you're familiar with the artist Virgil Finlay, aren't you?
Oh, I know that name.
science fiction, did a lot of covers. He's known for having
Right.
stippling
I
technique.
can't picture his work, but I know his name.
Well, he's most famous for doing this very intricate stippling technique. Can you imagine doing that technique gridded up? That's a lot of work. Yeah.
Mike G did a famous landscape called Merry Marvel March. Amazing. I don't remember that one.
Me either. I may recognize if I saw it, but
yeah. Merry Marvel March. And here's another comic I got this week. Nocterra #6. And this one is growing on me. Who is it? Scott Snyder and Tony S. Daniel, Tomio Moru. But I like put this one in the same category as Geiger because it's mainstream guys doing an indie comic. And I've been buying Geiger too, but I think this one has grown on me more than Geiger. This is, they're both post-apocalyptic stories. In this one, all the sunlight disappears. Everything still functions, but there's no light. And if, like, plants still grow and stuff like, because if the sun really went out, there'd be no heat and we'd all freeze to death in minutes. But that's not, that the light is just gone. And if human beings are in the dark for too long, they turn into these monsters, and they think these monsters are coming from another sort of parallel universe into ours to do stuff. And it's the story about the survivors and this woman who drives a truck from place to place, and she got caught up in this and that. And it's just been growing on me. I think it's just been a solid story. I said, and there's more of a story to it than Geiger. So that may be why I like it. I think Geiger has added more and more characters and not really gotten into the story yet. Is there a Jack Cole Plastic Man Artist Edition? Not as far as I know.
There is not.
Google it. We'll have to do that. He still sells it at conventions, but his style has changed. Yeah, okay. That's the Merry Marvel March. You know what poster I still wish I had? Speaking of art, George Perez did a Teen Titans poster that I used to have in the early 80s. That, like, the middle of it was Titans Tower. And then all around the edges were the various new Teen Titans jumping out at it.
Right.
I always liked that one, but you can't get it anymore.
I don't know if I've talked about it on this show or not, but there's a lot of iconic, not only covers, but interior art pieces. Probably a lot of them are done for promo pieces like posters and things like that. Where you have this group of superheroes just like either running or flying or a combination of both from a central point. And I'm like, what were those guys doing just 5 seconds ago when they're all clustered up together?
That's like one of my favorites. It was a couple of years ago. The Roy, who runs the LCS near me, just happened to point out, he's like, oh, the JLA, whose biggest enemy is rocks. And you can see that there was like 3 or 4 covers that month with the JLA like standing on rocks as rocks flew by or coming out at you. And there was for some reason, there was always rocks coming at them or at us. It was like, why so many rocks? What's going on? Because they're out in space. So to indicate space, somehow rocks do
asteroids. No.
Yeah. I wonder if any of that Jack Cole Plastic Man original art exists.
I've never looked, so I don't know.
I've never run across any.
1940s original art for Quality Comics?
I've got random 1940s pages by
sure, random, but
you never know.
Artist edition.
Let me hold on. Where are they?
Yeah, if I was Scott Denver putting together an artist edition, I imagine trying to find Jack Cole original art would be pretty rough, even for the network of people that he knows.
Mm-hmm. The Kirby Museum has a hard time finding Kirby pages, and Jack Cole was never as personable as Kirby was. So we probably didn't have people interested in keeping his art.
These are random Golden Age pages by Gil Fox, Poison Ivy, that I found on eBay years ago one day for not very much money. And they're on illustration board.
Yeah.
I think I forget where they're from now. I think I wrote it down somewhere, but I seem to have lost the paper. I want to look it up again. But these are just random Golden Age pages that showed up on eBay for like, I don't know, somewhere between $50 to $100 a page, maybe.
That's pretty cheap.
Yeah, and because it wasn't even listed in like the original comic arts section.
Right.
So I think that's why I got it so cheaply. But random Golden Age pages do show up. So I don't know who knows if any Plastic Man was. I mean, you would think Plastic Man would have a better chance of surviving than Poison Ivy by Gil Fox. But who knows?
That's character artist combination I hear a lot of original art collectors talk about. So
no, I don't hear anyone talk about collecting Plastic Man but you would think, what did he do for Playboy?
I don't know.
Did he have a strip? Sure. Did he just do gag cartoons? Because I have to assume his Playboy stuff survived.
Yeah.
Because I don't think Heck was into destroying art.
Those might still exist, yeah. But yeah, would Beasley Arnold have kept his art? I really don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes that stuff would be destroyed. Sometimes people would walk it out of the building.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's entirely possible that there are Jack Cole Plastic Man pages out there, but I don't think you can get them all together and reprint a whole story from the original art. Doing an artist edition.
Yeah, that would be rough.
You'd have to do it. You have to do it from shoot it from the original comics and fictionize it.
Yeah, they have the film for it all because it was all printed in DC DC archives. So they must have saved the stats or printing plates of it.
Yeah.
Because all that stuff was nicely done in DC's archives. I never heard they had any trouble. Mm-hmm. Because DC has always been good at archiving stuff for publication.
Mm. Right, but like remember, DC only bought quality in 1957, so a lot could have happened in 17 years.
But still, they have their golden age stuff, DC. DC has always archived, not the original art I'm talking about. I'm talking about the stats or the printing plates they've always archived. Yeah. So they've always been able to publish stuff. But the original art, who knows? They've been known to destroy plenty of original art. Mm. With original art increasing in price, someday we will have forgery. Yeah, I was thinking that too.
There's a lot of original art floating around.
I've seen some, but not really like as far as I know, no one has forged like a Jack Kirby Fantastic Four cover.
They've tried. And then people spot it pretty quickly. It's like, no, that's not the real thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I never hear stories about it, so I don't know. But I imagine it must be easier to forge a Jack Kirby Fantastic Four cover than, a Titian painting. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know either. You'd think so.
I know there's a whole school of artists that they don't do them as intentional forgeries, but they copy those paintings identically to learn.
Yeah, but those aren't meant to be
right. Exactly.
Right. And they won't be able to fool on close inspection.
No, but sometimes people will try to pass those off, even though it's not the artist that's doing the copying itself.
for Batman and Superman New. Yeah, because that wasn't DC. Yeah. That was the syndicator, probably. Like, which one was it? The was it Fantagraphics who published the Gasoline Alley stuff? Walton Skeezix. I think that all came from Chester Brown's collection, because he used to collect all the strips, out of the newspaper, not the original art. The original art doesn't exist, but he used to, there's a whole bunch of people who have collected strips, and there's that one guy whose name I don't know, who saved. You can find him and look him up I've read stories about him on the internet. I think he died a few years ago, but he collected comic strips cut out of the newspaper. Yeah. And he started like buying libraries' archives when they were getting rid of them, because otherwise all these strips wouldn't exist. And he ended up like having warehouses, and I think he left it all to someone or something. But a lot of obscure comic strips he's the only source for. Right. Because for like 50 or 60 years, that's what he did. I wish I knew his name, but I don't. Hey, my light's not on. I'm disappearing into the shadows. There we go. Now you can see me better in all my glory. And another comic I got this week. I like this cover. It seems to be kind of one of Terry Moore's usual covers. But then again, the style, I think the colorist made the style so much different. Usually don't see those sort of ruddy cheeks and texture in the shirt.
The face really stands out in comparison to everything else.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out what makes it different than the normal Terry Moore cover.
It's almost like the face has more lighting on it than everything else.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's all done in the coloring. Because it's a fairly sketchy cover. It's all from pencils. No. I mean, it's not nearly as slick as this back cover.
Right.
I don't think he usually does stuff. But do you guys read Terry Moore's stuff?
I've read Strange in Paradise, but I don't think I've read much of anything after that.
I
know about
it's always good.
I haven't read Rachel Rising or a couple of
Echo.
Echo. Yeah, I haven't read those.
They're both good reads. Oh, and here's something he did on Twitter. One day on Twitter, he came on and said, I have a lot of books in the background of some scenes. Who wants their name on a book? So people volunteer. So like here she is with a bookcase behind her with all sorts of people's names on the JB. He just Pete Hayes.
Right.
Just all sorts of names on the. He's like, who wants their name on a book? And people like me. I found that amusing. But another good issue. The lead on this looks like a 10-year-old girl, but she's really a demon who's thousands of years old, and she's hunting a serial killer who killed her friend, but the serial killer is also killing pedophiles of some kind. So, but the serial killer also kills the pedophiles' wives, who was a friend of hers. Right. Actually, a friend of the child she used to be's. That's an interesting thing in it, too, because once the demon took over her body, she didn't grow anymore. She's eternally a 10-year-old. But her friend grew up. So she was still friends with this woman who's like 30 now, but she's a 12-year-old demon, but she's still friends with her because she's still the little girl she once was, plus a demon. Okay.
It's got to be awkward at parties.
That's good stuff.
Did you forget the no, I'm forgetting it. The Steranko shield covers?
Nope.
No? Okay.
I was just thinking of them. Hold on. Let me get them. Here is our Rip Read. Oh, not leaving. I want our Rip Read and slab of Steranko shield covers. And notice I didn't even put number 1 in there. I think that's 3, 4, and 6. We got the Gothic horror cover, the pop art, the op art cover, and the sci-fi cover.
That's the Wallywood homage cover, really.
Yeah.
So 3, 4, and 6. I would slab 6. I would read 4, and I'd rip up 3.
I'd read 3, slab 4, and rip 6.
You don't like the Gothic one as much?
I don't like it as much as the other two. It's not, it's not bad at all. It's just I think the other two are better.
It's just that number three. Number 3 is the last one with a Steranko story. The other ones are just covers.
Steranko covers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I picked these ones just for their covers.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. The next series I should hunt down. Yeah, these.
That cover to number 6 is just so iconic. It's not even funny.
We start getting Frank Springer or whatever doing the art.
Oh, yeah.
Going from Steranko to Frank Springer.
That's a tough transition. But I really like that number 3 Gothic cover. What was that, Scott?
That's kind of like going from Mike Kaluta to Frank Robbins on the Shadow series.
I would say it might be worse, but I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, these are all, like I said, I was just going to pick 3 covers from 1968, but I couldn't even pick 3 Steranko covers. I had to break it down into Shield and everything. That's how many good covers there were.
Right.
And I was like, one of the reasons I like that Gothic cover on number 3 is there's so little like that. There we go. Love number 3. I mean, most of the Gothic covers you see are like from DC in the 70s on the mystery books.
Style-wise, number 3, I could almost see this is slight. It's very subtle. I could almost see a kind of Will Eisner quality to it.
Yeah. It's really tough. I think I'm going to... Well, now that I know that number 3 is the only one with Steranko still on the insides, I'm going to have to pick that one to read.
Okay.
And then I'm going to slab 6 and tear up 4 just because I've seen 4 a whole lot.
Right.
Yeah.
And the cover.
Everybody has a take on it.
Right,
Butler,
right. So
Galassi.
So that would be that would be my only way to choose.
Yeah, 95% of the time, everybody else's take is nowhere even close to Steranko's take.
No. I've seen people do it better technically, but it really doesn't matter. Yeah, and the other one I have, let me stop sharing here. That's just covers. Is John Romita. Once again, there are so many good John. I could have done this with Marie Severin too. There are so many good.
Yeah, you can do it.
These are 3 covers I liked from John Romita in 1968. I always liked the K-tones on that. What number is that? ASM 67 is the one with the giant Mysterio hands. I just always liked the K-tones, which is the black from Dark to Bottom. That Marvel didn't use those a lot on covers. Grayscale. We've got the Amazing Spider-Man Annual 5. And we've got that Amazing Spider-Man 62, the Medusa cover. I didn't ever see that Medusa cover until about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, that
For
one
some
jumped
reason,
up and out at me. Like, I don't recall having seen it before.
it's a really nice cover. Spider-Man bondage cover. Good evening, sleepy readers. We're doing one of our read, rip, and slabs with these 3 Romita covers from 1968. And it's interesting to see them at such a small size too. The sort of design of them really stands out. There's a really at this kind of small size on my screen, I can't see the drawing, but I can see the design.
Right.
And all 3 of these just have great design in them.
I really don't have an opinion on this one.
I think I'm going to read the annual just because it's big. But that means I'm going to have to rip up one of those 2 covers.
Yeah, I really don't have an opinion. Any of the 3 I could interchange for it, for the other 2. So.
I'm reading the annual because it's the first appearance of Spider-Man's parents.
I'm
ripping Medusa because there was no reason for her to still be an antagonist. Sometimes I think Stanley would forget she wasn't really a villain. And I would slap the Mysterio hands.
I think I would slab Medusa, and I'd have to rip those Mysterio hands. But I like that one. The Mysterio cover doesn't work for me. So it's the coloring on the Mysterio cover that makes it for me.
Yeah, but
it really is.
It's supposed to be an unreal landscape.
Yeah,
it's in a Mysterio illusion, so it does. The cover is not supposed to be realistic.
And like you just don't see those kind of K-tones in a Marvel color cover.
Right.
That's what makes it stand out to me and pop. But look. But man, holy cow, there's just so many good covers in 1968. I couldn't believe it. I have to do another year just because those were 6 Steranko covers that are a 7th with that X-Men one that was in another 7 Steranko covers that just I couldn't choose between. Right. 3 I could have done this for the Marie Severin Hulk cover because I've never read a lot of that era of Hulk, but those covers were great.
Right.
One of my personal favorite ones has always been the one with the Rhino, with the Hulk in the foreground just kind of hanging on something, like knocked out, and the Rhino charging at him. It's like Hulk 104 or something like that. Just one of them.
And there he goes again.
There he went.
But I think the internet is good anywhere. I had to plug it in because the Wi-Fi kept choking.
I got kicked out again.
But you come back quickly.
Slabbing is almost as bad as ripping. No, because at least you can look at the cover. That Medusa cover is amazing. Slabbing is just a whole different... Nothing I'll ever do. Never say never, but nothing I've ever done. But I understand.
I'm going to let's slap a random issue of Marvel's Care Bears from the 80s Star Comics line.
Did you see... ETA Nick did a video last week, the week before, about how slabbing isn't always good. So he went on, I forget where he went, I think it was Comic Link. And he looked at all the auctions for comics that were slabbed comics that went for $25 or under. And there was a lot. I think there was like 800. He's like, slabbing isn't always. He's like, these people made no money. They lost money on slabbing these comics. So don't send. And they had all sorts of crazy stuff. They had like what he was pointing out was like, what was it? It was like a random issue of like John Byrne's X-Men, maybe it was, at like an 8.0. That went for $25 because it's like if it's not a 9.6, no one wants it. So it was really weird to see some of the stuff. I can't even remember what the comics were, but they were like only highest It'd be like, a 9.0 of some Charlton comic. And it'd be like, highest grade slabbed. It'd be like, of a comic nobody wants.
Right.
It was amazing how many. Check out that video from ETA Nick on slabbed comics that lost money.
If it was published after 1987, it's actually the lowest graded that should fetch a higher price, because by the late 80s everybody was begging their comics, so there are bound to be a lot more nines and above. So an 8 would be rarer.
I've heard that said, but I don't know how true it is, because a lot of us were bagging our comics in the early 80s. And also people's relationship with most comic fans come and go within 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how well they took care of their comics after those 5 years was up. Maybe they got in, bagged and boarded all their comics for 5 years and then got rid of them. And who knows where those comics ended up? Probably a landfill.
Probably in Chuck Rosansky's warehouse.
Yeah, probably in Chuck Rosansky's warehouse. There you go. So I've heard that said, and it's logical. I just don't know how true it actually is. Like I said, only because so many people got rid of their comics. And imagine you're some guy in 1985. You just start getting into comics. You love them. You're having a great time. You're reading them. You're bagging. You're boarding them. You're putting them in a box. Not only you love your comics, you think they're valuable. 3 years goes by. It's 1988, and you're not as interested in the comics anymore. And they sit there for a couple of years. Maybe they sit there till comics are hot again in the 90s, and you're like, I may as well get rid of these comics. And you go to sell your collection that you think is worth $3,000, and the comic shop offers you $300 for it. Yes. And you're like, no thanks. And you go back home. These comics are now worthless to you. What do you do with them? Do they just sit there in your mother and your parents' house? Do you get rid of when you're moving from your place you're living now to the new place? Do you just leave them behind? Do you give them to a friend who's kind of interested in comics? That I think is the fate of a lot of comics, and I think that fate's kind of unknown.
Yeah.
Good day. Did you see the Wendy and Penny? No, yesterday in comics it was good. Wendy sold as a child when she bought her FF comics at a pool hall that also had girly magazines. She said Kirby and Astro Boy Creator were her biggest influences. Interesting.
I'm just not a fan of. I'm not a fan of that ElfQuest art style.
I haven't. I want to go back and read them. Never read more ElfQuest because the stuff I read I love. I need to read more. That's it. I got back when in the early '80s. I think I mailed away for my ElfQuest. I probably jumped on maybe a year or two before it ended.
Yeah.
How many issues was the original ElfQuest? 20?
I have no idea.
I may have jumped on at like issue 15 and got like 12 or 15 issues and loved it and followed it to the end. But then when they did it again, what was it, Siege and Blue Mountain under Epic Comics? I bought those and I just wasn't as into it. And I kind of never really got into it again. You know what? I understand slabbing current comics. Part of it is it's a craft. I can rebuy most of my old collection for less than I paid for them. Yeah.
I can't.
Most comics aren't worth anything.
Yeah.
Slabbing is for selling only. Yeah. Why people buy modern books slabbed is a better question. They think it's a good idea. I mean, And you know what it is? People, it's that number they're chasing. That 9.8. And part of it, I think, is being right. Part of it is being able to look at a new book saying, I think this one is a 9.8, and sending it off and getting a 9.8. And you're like, I was right. There is so little opportunity in most people's lives to be right about anything. Just think about it. In your day-to-day life, you never get to be right.
I don't know. I know an awful lot of people that think they're right all the time. So.
Yeah, there are, but they never actually get to. They never get to actually be proven right. And most people don't think that.
There's no scientific evidence that they're right.
Right. There's no evidence that they're right. Yeah. But you're right. There are plenty of people who think they're right all the time, but plenty who don't. Yeah, the magical 9.8, that number fascinates people. That number means I was right to send this book in. It's all about the 9.8. I've left comments on, like, just YouTubers I'm acquainted with who come out, they're like, 9. I'm like, 9.6, throw that thing in the garbage. Why do you even have that? No, they know I'm just joking with them. But that's part when you're disappointed when you get a 9.6.
It just seems to me like after you slab a book, what you've created is a giant sports card.
Yeah.
You can look damage, and that's it.
Well, And what I find funny too is when a slab is damaged, the actual physical plastic is damaged, it's worth less. Like you could have a 9.8 of the same book, a 9.8 of whatever, and it's worth $100. And you can have a 9.8 with a cracked slab, and it's worth $50.
Which has nothing to do with the book itself. Yeah.
No one wants to look at their book and see a crack in the slab, and no one wants to send it back to CGC. It's too much of a pit. That's going to cost you money and time. And
that's the technical word I would use for that is the word silly.
But it's understandable. No one wants a cracked slab. Because when you buy a slab, the slab itself is part of the experience. That's why people keep their slabs in bags, so their slabs don't get scratched.
So what are we going to have next? We're going to have slabs for the bags that went over the slabs. It's just
you're going to have to put your slab in a slab.
And then like 50 years from now, the thing's going to be that thick, and you get like 3 of them in a box.
It's going to weigh.
We can bring back the exhibit meme. Yo, dog, I heard you like slabs, so you put your slab in the slab, so you can look at the slab inside the slab.
Yeah, the only slab, I would say your average person, slabs were invented to sell comics, and I can understand it in terms of when the difference between a 9.8 and a 9.2 is 400% in the price. And I'm the buyer, I'm going to see a 9.2. And then you're the seller, you're going to see a 9.8. And we have to come to some middle ground there. By slabbing it, there's no middle ground. There's, CGC said it's a 9.8. Don't argue with me that it's a 9.2. You're not going to get you're not going to get you're not going to get a 9.8 slabbed comic arguing that it's a 9.2. Unslabbed comics, you could get some money off the price by saying that.
Yeah.
I heard they're slabbing old monster magazines and film magazines from the 50s and 60s.
Those are extremely collectible.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably a bigger market for some of those than a lot of comics.
Mm-hmm. And for TV guides. I think they're doing TV guides too.
Magazines just reminded me. Remember last week, the week before, when I was talking about Ralph Reese and the work he did in Genesis, a girly magazine from the 70s?
Right.
Well, Terrence, Comic Crack, found me some shady links to places where you could download adult magazines or whatever. So I attempted it, and I downloaded one of the random issues of Genesis from the 70s, scans of it. And they didn't bother to scan any of the comics. I was like, I was so disappointed. And I'm like, it's just girly pictures. Where are the comics?
It's like, I'm here for the comics. I don't want to see what the hell's going on, man. That's funny.
When I was selling a collection, I argued with the guy about how many books were in one of the boxes. As Jared said, slabbing gets rid of any argument a comic nerds wants to instigate. Yeah. I'm your man for shady links.
There was this quote that Ray Bradbury had because he was talking about the quality of writing that Playboy had. And they had some very quality writers, Yeah. A lot of times people can't see the forest for the tease.
Mm-hmm. Shady links.
I don't know if you guys saw it, but I sent Terrence this, and I put it in the link that we had. This Steve Vai was looking to photograph some guitars that were stolen from him years ago, and it was one of the ones he had was just plastered with little Fanny comics all over.
Oh yeah, that's right. You posted that, right? Pretty wild. And also, when you get a high. It's tough to buy and sell high-end slab comics that are stolen because they have high-res photographs of everything.
Right.
So if you steal a slabbed comic, crack it, and send it back to CGC, and it matches one of their scans of a stolen comic, you've been caught. I found that interesting. I read about that a little while ago. But that's what they do. So because every comic has marks on it, and like that comic's fingerprint.
Yeah.
And here's another thing that came out this week: the first issue of the French Elric: The Dreaming City.
Nice Mignola cover there.
Mike Mignola cover. It's funny. I like Mike Mignola's covers better than his interior work.
I could see that.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
I like both, but
not that I dislike his interior work. I just never got into it that much. But you can see by the formatting, it was originally a graphic album because it's got the extra white space up at the top. But at least they're pushing the trim line here where there's only a quarter an inch away from the trim, which is the modern trim line in publishing rather than the half inch it used to be. Because like books like what is that woman's name? Maria Lovett. I've seen a lot of her work published recently by I think AWA, and they're still using the old school trim line where everything had to be a half an inch in from the edge. So the pages are even smaller.
No.
But remember when I told you that these were being published in chronological order and we had no idea what that meant for. Well, was this the first Elric book, The Dreaming City?
I don't know. I'd have to.
I don't remember either. But but in the beginning, it has previously. They have all this stuff that's happened to Elric and his cousin, and I'm like, I don't know if that's because this isn't the first book, or because he wrote stuff later on, prequel stuff. And he just kind of threw us into the middle of it.
Let's see.
How's the story? If it's good, I may look for a Spanish translation. I'm enjoying it. I thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed the artwork. I thought the story was fine. I don't remember the story at all. I've read the novel back in the 90s. And probably the last time I read the Dreaming City comic was in the 90s, the Craig Russell one. So it's like This is almost all new to me, but I thought it was really well done. I liked it.
Yeah, the first appearance was the Dreaming City in 1961.
Okay. So they must have thrown us right in the middle of Elric's life. And this previously is all that happened to him before then.
Yeah, that I can see that happening, with a lot of pulp characters like, Conan or whatever, where they didn't start the comic adaptation the same place they started in a novel.
Because in all the previously stuff, grading can easily be automated soon. Let's hope so. They can get more stuff done, get more books out. But like all the stuff that happened first was like Elric grew up. He was an albino. He was supposed to take over his city. He feuded with his cousin who kicked him out. He was in love with his other cousin. He had a whole life. So like this takes place when he's kicked out of Melniboné, and he's kind of looking to destroy it, kind of thing. And I think that's where the Elric story starts, but I don't really remember.
It's almost like a Greek tragedy kind of story.
Yeah, it's very much a tragedy. Yeah, like I said, I enjoyed the first issue. I'm looking forward to the series. I wish it was in graphic album format, but oh well. At least they've got the modern. It's a little bit bigger than some of the other graphic album stuff because they're.
It reminds me, it's funny, every time I'm watching the videos that are done with Terrence and Damien and LaRossa and Earl Grey, every time they're talking about a book, Earl Grey will reach over off his shelf and pull off a nicer format that was published somewhere in Europe, and it always cracks me up when he does that.
And there are some bleeds in this too, where they must have extended the art for the American version. But it was, I think it was Carmen that did the best. The was it Julium March? Which is it? A hard G or a J?
Guillem
March. He did the best job making something for the European and North American formats. I have to say, because you could barely notice he was doing it in Carmen, but he did, because he pushed a lot of bleeds. Like bleeds make it look like it was made for this format, and you just have to extend the art a little bit past the European format. But it's it's nothing. It's the sky and buildings above there. So if you're going to bleed it, you just here's a double page that here. Gore, here's one thing that didn't read well. They decided this never works. They decided to put red type on black captions. Why does anybody think that's a good idea?
If you do that, it's got to be bright red, or you're not going to be able to read it.
I had a hard time reading that. I think it was the first printing of Arkham Asylum did that too. Famously, they changed it for other printings.
Right.
But red type on black captions, that's lunacy.
Yeah, but they probably want some color there, except yellow looks too childish.
Right.
Don't get me started on yellow, man.
And since what makes it even harder to read is it's occasionally off register.
Yeah.
So red overprinting over the black makes it blurry. So it's even a little. All of a sudden you get it's not even overprinting. It's knocking out. So you get a tiny little white line at times, making it even harder to read.
I wonder if you had I don't know. That'd be hard to do. I wonder if you went in and intentionally put a thicker white line around the red text, if it would read better that way.
No.
You run the risk of making the white line so obnoxious that it gets in the way.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. My Arkham Asylum hardcover is indecipherable. It's first print. Yeah. I remember that about it. You just can't read it.
Sometimes back then people would do, actual handwriting font. But instead of being a computer scanned font, it was handwriting. And a whole page of that stuff is hard to read.
That's why what was that? I wonder if today's kids can a 20-year-old like reading that last issue I had of Department of Truth, where a lot of it was handwriting, cursive. I'm like, can a 20-year-old read cursive? Because they stopped teaching cursive in school.
See why not?
Because they never learned it.
Yeah,
my nephew.
Go ahead.
My nephew, who's 17, going on 18 in October, they taught him cursive back in the 3rd grade, but he never uses it. And his grandmother, my mother, sends him postcards in cursive, and that's the only time he gets to read anything in cursive. And he's got to be like, all right, what does this say? Okay. So I imagine there's people who can't read cursive.
I'm sure there probably are. I wonder if those same people also have other problems reading.
No. It's because when they used to teach us cursive, they now teach typing.
Yeah.
Because typing is a lot more useful than cursive. So, and that's in the 3rd grade, they start teaching you typing.
But it's interesting you say that. I think it depends on the individual person, because, like, I don't know how to say what I want to say. I know my brain knows, but I don't know the words to go along with it.
Yeah, you can't speed write without cursive, but people don't speed write anymore. Everything's machines they write on.
I can probably write as fast in block print as in cursive.
Yeah, I haven't written in cursive in a long. All my notes are in print.
Yeah, the only time I ever use cursive is when I'm signing my name. Everything else, block printing. It looks like an architect.
My notes are not in print; they're in hieroglyphs.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at. If you looked at either hieroglyphic or Sanskrit, you can read those. Now, you may not know what they are, but you can visually recognize those characters. Yeah. And your brain tells you this is a different character than the one before it or after it. Okay. Mm-hmm. I wonder if that would have a similar effect on people looking at cursive that didn't grow up with it.
Yeah, probably. That's interesting. What would it look like?
Have you ever seen Georgian language script?
No.
It doesn't look like anything European. It doesn't look like Persian or Sanskrit. It doesn't look like Russian script or Greek script. It's really, really weird. Only the Georgians have it.
Gotcha.
Huh. I never heard of that.
Yeah, there's some really unique styles like that.
I took notes in college.
Answering Gore Vidal, there is a Spanish album. It's published in Spain by Yermo Ediciones.
Ah, he can get the Spanish album. Mm-hmm. He's got to learn French so he can read it in the original French.
Yeah, and after he learns French, he'll find out that knowing French and Spanish, he can read Italian.
And a little bit of Portuguese.
Oh, you only need Spanish for that.
Oh,
you can read it. If you know Spanish, you can read about 85% Portuguese.
Yeah, the Romance languages are similar.
Yeah, but you start losing context the further apart you are. Sure. So that's why you need both Spanish and French to understand Italian. But I can speak Italian, but I can read it. I can understand it.
And then German is just a whole completely different ball of wax.
Yeah.
Language is an interesting thing.
Yeah. Language was always hard to me. It wasn't one of the things that I was
the exact opposite. It always came really easy to me.
It's all memorization for me.
Fair enough. Yeah, I do. God, I still have nightmares about verb conjugation in Spanish. Like, we don't have these tenses in English. If we do, we don't call them that.
Yeah.
But
I took French in high school. It was my worst subject.
Gotcha.
I forgot the pluque parfait. I forgot most of the tenses. You have to memorize how to use all the tenses for each verb. And I forgot because I don't practice it.
Yeah.
But I can still read it. But if I have to have a conversation, I'm going to sound like a caveman because everything gets brought back to present tense.
That was the same way when I had 3 years of Spanish in high school, and we can read and write it. But if we tried to speak at anything approaching a conversational speed, we sounded like complete idiots.
Yeah. Portuguese sounds close to Russian.
If you listen to it, yes, it's not Russian. It's actually Berber.
I probably remember as much French now as I learned in high school, which is very little. I can still because, like I said, learning French was all memorization, and I was not very good or interested in memorization. But the stuff I actually did memorize, I can sing the Chevalier de la Table Ronde, goûtons voir si le vin est bon. Chevalier, oui, oui, oui. Chevalier, non, non, non. Chevalier, si le vin est bon.
See, Paolo, he knows this, but he doesn't know
in the 8th grade in French class about passing the wine around the table to see if it's good.
Right.
Can I have a conversation? No.
Getting back to languages, that's something I noticed just a few days ago. If you're familiar with the Romance languages, you reckon even though you may not be able to read and write them per se, if you see them printed out, you recognize syntax and structure to a degree.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at another language like Tagalog or Urdu, it's a completely foreign, alien thing. It's like, I don't know what this is.
Yeah. The funny thing about Romance languages, they're all closer to each other than they are to Latin. Because they're based on vulgar Latin, not on actual Latin.
I can also ask where Philip and Sylvie are. Où est Philippe? À la piscine. Où est Sylvie? À la bibliothèque. It's like the stuff I memorized in the 8th grade, I can still remember, but it's useless.
Bibliothèque is a fairly common word in a lot of languages.
Piscine is the pool. But like that's all I know. The same stuff I knew in the 8th grade, even though I took it in the 9th grade and 10th grade too. I don't remember.
Gore is like Gomez Adams. Once she starts talking different language, he just goes nuts.
Yeah, but if she has a Belgian accent, no.
I can barely write with my hands anymore. I can take notes, but only I can read them.
Yeah, that's normal.
I'm not a Frenchie. I'm a Belgian.
When I took notes in college, I had my own special characters that I created that I knew what they were to. It's kind of like my own version of shorthand.
I recently discovered my old notes from college art history class. And the most amusing thing in them is if you take an art history class, with your notes, you have to do little drawings. And just, crappiest little, because what happens is, if you've never taken an art history class is you sit in the class, and there's a professor with a slide projector, and he shows you paintings, from all throughout art history in famous style, and you have to take notes on the paintings, and you have to learn you have to be able to identify them. Right. The whole idea is to be able to identify a Manet, a Monet, a Titian. So it's like you have to quickly draw the painting a little, if it's a person, and write little notes to go with it, the painting, so you can identify them. Because, there was no internet. There was no books, didn't have all the paintings in them. So you only had your notes to rely on to be able to identify. I imagine it's much easier nowadays.
The problem with actual physical books back then, if you had 50 people taking the same class, the books you want in the university library are going to be checked out by somebody else that's in that same class that you're in. Yeah.
No,
New York English is vulgar English?
Yeah, get out of here.
Very vulgar. Yeah.
Although London English is also a bit vulgar.
Yeah, just get this image of Gore Vidal. She starts speaking French, and he starts kissing her up the arm like Gomez did.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot more memorization in art history than you think there is. Yeah, and you had to fight to stay awake in art history class because they turn all the lights off and turn the slide projector on.
Yeah,
so really like, whoa.
We had a big argument that broke out when I was in college. One of the art history professors, they were going over the Middle Ages, which is a historical subject I'm really interested in. This art history professor just out and out in front of the class one day blurts out that castles were not built for military purposes.
Uh-oh, sounds
Everybody's
breaking
like,
up.
what the hell is this guy talking about? And then they got one of the other history professors in on it. There was a big fracas, and it was sad just to watch it all.
We're going to spend the rest of our lives explaining things before the internet. Ain't that true?
That's true. And think, if you're a what's the word I'm looking for? A sociologist these days, YouTube is the best tool ever invented.
All right. My sound is breaking up, so I'm going to leave the studio and come back before it kicks me out.
Okay.
And how come?
Yeah, back in the old days, before we had Google, we actually had to look stuff up in encyclopedias and dictionaries and whatnot.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I loved my Encyclopedia Geographica.
I was lucky when I had older stuff.
When I was 7 years old, I could impress all my relatives with my knowledge of country capitals.
When I was a little kid, I was really lucky because we had an older set of Encyclopedia Britannicas, and they must have been given to us because I'm sure they couldn't afford them back then. But I remember going in, like when you're screening to go into kindergarten or whatever, and here I am, 6 years old, 5 years old at the time, reading out of Encyclopedia Britannica, and just seeing their faces drop when I'm doing this. I'm like, I don't know that this is unusual for a 5-year-old kid. You know, I thought everybody did this.
Yeah.
One of my friends, when he was in junior high and high school, read the encyclopedia so he could talk to girls about anything.
And how did that work out for him?
Pretty well. He had the gift of
Really?
gab. I mean, when it came to talking to, you know what he had that I lack and a few of my other friends lack?
Confidence.
The ability to agree with anything and talk about it, no matter how dumb. Like back in college, we used to overhear some of his conversations with women, and we'd just be like, "Where are you from? Pittsburgh. I've always wanted to live in Pittsburgh." And then he'd start talking about, and then we'd be like, wow, he's never wanted to live in Pittsburgh. Or else the other thing he would do is he would read book jackets. So at least he could talk a little bit about certain famous books. And occasionally he would say stuff and we'd be like, wow, he's got the gift of gab going, because the woman is hypnotized. Country capitals. Not many know where country. Oh yeah. Like I said, here in the U.S., geography is the worst. Everybody, I would say, over half of people in the U.S. are not just bad, but are terrible at geography.
I would agree. Yeah, they're pretty bad.
Well, sometimes you can memorize them because they're funny. I mean, the capital of Burkina Faso is Ouagadougou, and that's funny.
Jared, I don't know if you would agree with me this or not, but have you noticed that people that live in New York City that don't own cars and they don't drive outside the city, they are very city centric. I mean, ridiculously so. I
live 35 miles outside of New York City. There are people who in New York City don't know this place exists.
Right.
They have no clue. They only know because they fly from city to city.
Yeah.
Or they take a train somewhere. And it's a little difficult. There's no trains on my side of the river, but freight train. So it's like they know Westchester exists, which is across the river from Rockland County.
Right.
But they don't even know. They have no clue it exists.
Most things are like that in terms of like people that live in the major population centers don't necessarily have a good idea of what the rest of the state is like. They may know a few things about it, but after that, their knowledge gets a little sketchy.
Right.
And just think in the modern age we live in with all the communication methods we have now, think what that was like in Europe in the Middle Ages, for example.
Yeah.
It was that times 1,000.
Yeah, you wanted to take a 100-mile trip. You were gone for the week.
Yeah.
That was going.
Yeah.
Then you had to come back.
And when you came back, in comparison to everybody else, you were a famous world traveler.
Yeah,
Right.
and people would say, "Oh, I miss you so much." I was just 100 miles away.
I only know the state locations because I purposefully memorized them. Otherwise, I wouldn't.
Yeah, but like
That sounds nice.
Lisbon is 25 miles away, and my mom still wishes me a nice trip if I go there. It's 25 miles. It's half an hour. I'm just gonna buy a book and come back.
Your wife must be somewhere near me then. So she's a small town close to New Jersey, because not a lot of New York is close to New Jersey.
It's probably the way New York likes it too.
Maps can fix that.
Only Manhattan.
In Texas, most elements of which barely cover social studies. Yeah, and Texas, being that Texas is so big, a lot of other states follow Texas's lead in school books.
Mm.
That's scary. Some of the Texas school book stuff is just scares me.
Yeah, well, when you live in like Manhattan, there's almost no reason to ever leave Manhattan, and it's difficult. It's difficult because New York is a pedestrian city. Even like people from the boroughs outside of Manhattan refer to New York. They refer to Manhattan as the city. So if you live in Manhattan, you almost never leave it. If you do, it's on a plane.
And especially, I think there's some merit to this, but people in New York, New Jersey area, anytime they go anywhere else, they're always bitching about good pizza, that they can't find it anywhere.
Yep.
So it's not just the New York Chicago thing?
There's a rivalry there. The people from New York don't even consider Chicago deep style pizza as actual pizza.
Yeah, it isn't. It's a quiche.
People from New York don't consider Chicago. You could end right there. People from New York never think it does. Chicago. I would say people who live in New York City, the idea of Chicago doesn't even enter their minds. That's how.
Yeah, but I'm a continent away, and even I know that deep dish pizza is not pizza.
It's good though. Having said that, the one thing I have noticed, and this is unusual, that people from New York, New Jersey, once they get down here, once they discover barbecue, you don't have that quality of barbecue in New York City.
Mm.
Yeah. That's
and traveling,
the only foods that they don't.
Traveling is often expensive and time consuming. So most people don't do it.
That's true too.
I have no idea if Rand McNally went out of business. Good question. Those test score have just much of education. Yeah, those Texas tests. Or they're bitching about bagels. There's that too. But in the defense of those people, around the New York City area really does have really good bagels and pizza that are not like other places. There's also plenty terrible bagels and pizza. It's like if you go to New York City expecting every place to have good pizza, you'll be disappointed. But when you find the good pizza places, you'll be like, wow. One of the best places I ever had pizza was in Albany, New York.
Okay.
Which is the state capital. It's 3-4 hours from Manhattan. But I had a friend going to Albany State College, and that is a huge school. There's 40,000 students or maybe more.
Yeah.
And there were pizza places everywhere around the campus. And so my friend Sarah was like, no, I'll take you to the good place. So she took us to, Place for Pizza. It was some of the best pizza I've ever had.
Yeah.
But if you don't know that's the good place, you're out of luck. But yes, some of the best pizza I ever had was in Albany.
I was so disappointed. The worst pizza I ever had was at this small diner somewhere in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Charles Bess and I were driving back home from New York, and we stopped off at this place, and it's like, we got this pizza. I'm like, it's New Jersey pizza. It's probably going to be pretty good. It was like somebody had taken a giant round Triscuit and scraped 90% of what used to be the sauce off of it and passed that off as a pizza. I'm like, this is terrible.
New Yorkers in Portland are constantly searching for that's because an authentic bagel is so much better than whatever else passes for a bagel, which is really just a roll.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but if you want that authentic bagel that's kind of crispy on the outside and chewy and dense on the inside and very flavorful, the roll bagels won't do it.
You'll find it in Munich.
What was that?
You'll find it in Munich.
Yeah. Sam Shepard. If you wanted to understand the U.S., to travel to Texas. Winters fell in love with Houston, a city I also lived in. And speaking of Texas, one of my favorite singers died this week, Nancy Griffith, a folk singer from, I think she was originally from around Houston.
Mm-hmm.
But absolutely, she's one of I've seen a lot of obituaries for Nancy Griffith this week. And a lot of them mentioned how they tried to make her into country music star, but it never took. She was always kind of in the folk scene, and she was very Texas. But she's been one of my. I always say, if I was on a deserted island and only had two people's catalogs of music, one male and one female, it would be Tom Waits and Nancy Griffith. Would be the two catalogs I could listen to.
That's an interesting combination.
Yeah. Texas barbecue is best.
Texas barbecue is pretty damn good.
Which is the real Rays? Nobody knows. And that's the truth. Original Rays, famous original Rays. There's three of them. Nobody knows. They actually all have made good pizza. I've been to all three variations of them, and they all had good pizza. Yeah, it's no longer just local.
I mind doing some in-depth research to find out who has the best pizza.
German pretzels, better than bagels. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah,
I'll take a bagel.
A friend of mine visited a music festival in Germany a few years ago, and she described to me what they were trying to pass off as Mexican food. And it was just sorry. It was just like, oh, that's not good at all. Awful lot of good musicians came from Texas.
Yeah, well, it's a big state with a big musical history.
That's true.
She was one of my favorites. So, tell your wife and I we have that in common, Sleepy. I'm in a Lone Star state of mind. But yeah, that was like, whoa. Nancy Griffith died. I wasn't expecting. And they also said she quietly retired a few years ago because of health problems. I was like, she was so quiet, I didn't even know. But what's weird is we don't know what killed her, because she said for a week after she dies, there will be no announcements about anything besides that she died. I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, Dusty Hill just passed away a couple weeks ago, too.
Yeah, she may have been from Austin, not Houston. I think the last thing I saw a little thing where she said she's from, but she may have not been from Austin proper. Yeah, or if she was from Austin, it was from the 70s Austin, which is a lot different than 2021's Austin.
One of the guitar teachers used to live here. He moved down to Austin because he's a professional musician. He loves it down there. He says the traffic is horrible, but other than that, he said he really likes it.
Scott completely broke up on me again. I'm going to leave and come back.
Okay.
Terrible internet. When I think about the U.S. music scene,
don't get me started on the U.S. music scene.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with New York and Chicago, maybe Detroit too.
Another comic I got this week is Time Before Time, number 4. And I think Sleepy's going to agree with me on this one. The first issue of this was the best issue, which is kind of rare. It was just such a wonderful setup first issue. It hasn't been bad. It's just been okay since then. Time travel story.
Can you hold that cover up so I can see a little better? Okay, there you go. That's kind of an interesting cover.
What is the symbol? It's just like this. This is the guy who's very Mignola-ish in his art, but not. But B level or C level even Mignola. Not prime. Mignola's an A-level talent. So even if I'm not a huge fan of him, his interior, he's an A-level talent. But time travel story, these two different timelines, each have time travel, and time travel is a business. So they're having sort of a business war over time travel. And our lead character just wants out of the game, but he can't get out of the game.
Right.
So the first issue was an A. All the other issues have been Bs. But it's still, I'm still enjoying it. Yes, agree on time. Exactly. The first issue was an A. Another Chris Christopherson. Yeah. I was raised on Chris Christopherson. He was my mother's favorite. So I grew up. Matter of fact, you think growing up on rock and roll is weird? Grow up on Chris Christopherson, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, and Johnny Cash. Because trying to figure out Chris Christopherson lyrics that you're singing along to in the car at 10 years old, it's all about heroin overdoses, all sorts. There's one song that just Billy D, which was about a guy having a heroin. One of my favorite Chris Christopherson songs, but trying to figure out what it was about when I was 10 was like reaching for the needle that drove him down to hell. Yeah. Played high school football, flew choppers in Vietnam. Yeah. If you've never heard Chris Christopherson's own music and singing, it's good stuff. I've always wanted to watch Looper, but I haven't seen it, so I don't know if it's like Looper yet. Oldies and a Headbanger's Ball.
There you go, man. Yeah.
But that's kind of one of the reasons I really liked just reading this, graphic novel, graphic album. It was a beginning, middle, and end. I don't think I've read anything in the graphic album category in so long. Because even when you pick up a trade paperback these days, it's often part 1 of 6,
Sure.
So it was fun reading this format. That and the art and writing were good. I mean, it's not just format, that's for sure.
Right.
I found over the years I enjoy Peter Milligan's writing more. He's always solid. How accurate is King of the Hill on Texas Life? Been watching it over again with Quacking Duck.
There's a guy I used to work with, and I swear to God that the character Dale on King of the Hill must have been based on this guy. They have so much in common, it's not even funny.
And I've got one more Marvel 1968 Read, Rip, and Slab. No visual aids for this one because it's all about number ones or not number ones. The 3 choices you have are Cap 100, Hulk 102, and Doctor Strange 169. Those are all the first issues of the split books, now single books. Cap 100, Hulk 102, and Doctor Strange 169. Doctor Strange 169 has that nice Dan Atkins cover.
For me, it's just based on familiarity. Just because it's something different, I'd read Doctor Strange because I haven't read that one yet.
Yeah.
And the other 2 would be a toss-up.
Cap 100, Hulk 102. Which do you like better?
I don't know. I'd have to see the cover.
You tear up.
Yeah.
You don't even care. I wasn't able to get 3 he liked equally.
I don't know if we need more Boomhauers or not.
Yeah, I actually shared the covers on some of the earlier ones that were. I shared the covers on 4 of them tonight, so I don't have to do that more often now. But the ones I shared the covers with were based just on covers. That's what made me get the idea that because most of the ones I picked up before weren't based on how they looked, kind of. But all these Marvel 68 ones have such famous covers too. But yeah, I'm gonna have to do that from now on. Is make up little cover things because it's not that hard. It's what I do.
I think I'm going
But it's like when
I'm going to read Cap, Slab, Hulk, and Rip Doctor Strange.
ooh, I think I'm gonna slab Doctor Strange because I always wanted that cover, so I may as well have it on a slab. But I've never got it, and I will see. I like both Culpin. I'm going to read Hulk and rip Cap because I think that Cap may be an introductory issue.
It's not. It's a continuation of the Tales of Suspense storyline.
Oh, well. I ripped up a continuation. Oh, well, got to rip one of them. Let me read it. Which starred Chris as one of the accurate portrayals of small-town life in Texas. Leave it to an Easterner to get us right. That's like some of my favorite New York City songs are from, outside of not New York City people. Because I think most people, are in New York City for a little while. Like James McMurtry's Down Across the Delaware is one of my favorite New York City songs. And it's about a guy who doesn't even live in New York City. He lives in New Jersey and commutes into New York City. And he's leaving for a while. He can't take it anymore. He's driving down across the Delaware. And I'm a huge James McMurtry fan to begin with. I really like it. He's Larry McMurtry's son, except he's a singer-songwriter. And he inherited his father's gift for storytelling, but in songs. And Down Across the Delaware is just one of my favorite New York City songs. And Nancy Griffith, I can't remember what it is now. Oh, she's got another one of my favorite New York City songs, and it's about living in New York City, and she's moved there, and the city has kind of worn on her, and she wants to leave New York City, but not quite yet because she still appreciates. Oh, what is the name of that one? I can't remember. Mm-hmm. And then there's one of the most popular New York City songs is the Pogues' Fairy Tale of New York, which is once again a New York City song about people not from New York City living in New York City. So there's so many great New York City songs that are about, people being there for a while. Of course, Sinatra, New York,
The more I learned about Sinatra as a human being, he was terrible.
Yeah, he
was not a good human being. He's a good singer, but as a person, not so much.
I don't know if he was, one of the world's worst human beings. But
no, he's not the worst, but
he had flaws.
He had some pretty serious flaws.
New York, New York, New York. What? Oh man, I forgot about that Nancy Sinatra song. I'm gonna have to. And there's another one by. There's another one by what's his name? Ben. He's the guy who's gotten in trouble. Oh God, I don't have to look up his mind. He's got a song called New York, New York.
Oh.
But it's not the same New York, New York. I'm gonna have to look up his name because I've all of a sudden escaped. I'm gonna remember it as we sit here. But he's one of these guys. I think he used to sing with a fairly famous indie band and then got famous on his own in the last 10 years. What was that?
Was it Ben Folds?
No, it wasn't Ben Folds.
Okay.
It was another. Nancy Sinatra is great. Friday's Child is a killer. Yeah, I like Nancy Sinatra. I have a greatest hits of Nancy Sinatra that I've played many times over the years. I think she's really good. It's what the, I'm gonna have to look on my iPad. Hold on, that's gonna be the easiest way to do it. Just because that the guy's name is fleeing from my head now is driving me crazy, and I know I've got this on many playlists. Let's just look up. Once again, one of the best New Yorks. I've never actually put it together. But I want to make an entire playlist of New York songs. Your library. Oh, where the hell is he? No, it's not Lou Reed. Slow New York, that's a good one, but that's not what I'm looking for. Oh, Ryan Adams, that's his name. Ryan Adams has a song, New York, New York. It's one of my favorite New York songs. Matter of fact, the video for it was shot like on September 8th, 2001. And the video is him with his guitar under the Brooklyn Bridge with the Twin Towers in the background. So he had to put out a disclaimer when he put out the video. He's like, this was shot shortly before 9/11.
There were two other albums that were released on 9/11. The one was by Dream Theater, and I can't remember the other band, but it had imagery that had a New York City obvious outline, which is the two towers, but it's like on top of an apple, it's supposed to be the Big Apple, with a flame behind it, which had nothing to do with the actual events of that day. But they had to pull that because it just happened to come out that given day. It's like the timing was just, you couldn't ask for worse timing on something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Many singing idols are questionable people. Let's see.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Not Nancy Griffith, though. Everyone says nothing but nice things about Nancy Griffith after she died.
If Elvis was big in today's environment, he would get canceled in a heartbeat.
Yeah, probably. I mean, didn't he marry his underage cousin?
No, that was Jerry Lee Lewis.
That was Jerry Lee Lewis?
Well, Jerry Lee Lewis is a whole different. He makes Chuck Berry look like a saint in comparison.
Baby Cried All Night Long, another from Her I Love. Lee Hazelwood wrote it, I think. Nancy Sinatra, okay. Dream Theater is pretty fantastic. I don't know Dream Theater. Let's see, one more comic I got this week. Homesick Pilots. Once again, the second volume of this thing continues to be different than the first volume in that it went from this punk rock ghost story to this Gundam versus ghost stories. But we got some more interesting ghost stories in this because there's this the first story arc was this a female singer. She's in her early 20s. Lead singer, or maybe she's even late teens. I don't remember how old she's supposed to be. A singer in a punk rock band ends up in this haunted house. This haunted house just kind of takes her, and now she's linked to this haunted house. She escaped it at the end of that story. But meanwhile, another singer from another punk rock band, they're rivals kind of, or they're compatriots. They're rivals, but in a friendly way. She now is linked to these government contractors who are trying to, because she's somehow linked to these ghosts too. And they're making her this Gundam suit to make ghost weapons out of, so they can destroy this haunted house that this first punk rock girl is attached to. And that's been the whole second story arc, which is so different than the first story arc.
That is such a gonzo combination of different things.
It is crazy. But I really liked the first half of this when we have the first girl who's linked to the haunted house. And they're telling the stories of some of the ghosts that live in the haunted house. And of course, they're tragic stories because they're ghosts. How could they not be tragic? So they were just nice little tragic stories about ghosts. And then we switch over to this other girl, her story with her Gundam suit to fight the ghosts. So I guess we're setting up a battle between the Gundam suit girl and the haunted house. Well, the haunted house girl doesn't really want to be haunted by the house. So there's all sorts of stuff going on in this.
Right.
So I've been enjoying this second story arc, but it's so weird. And it's just so weird.
Yeah, that's an interesting mix.
Yeah. Punk rock haunted house stories.
With Japanese robots.
What were the best New York comic books? Speaking of, a lot of good New York songs, but what, like Spider-Man would have to be that. New York was a character in Spider-Man. I'm trying to think if there are any. Daredevil, the Hell's Kitchen was especially the Frank Miller Daredevil.
Yeah, but
Hell's
Daredevil
Kitchen
is the local neighborhood thing.
Right.
New York.
Right, but it's New York-ish. I mean, they can only take place in a New York neighborhood, but I don't think there's a lot of
Turtles. Yeah, Turtles. Yeah.
Turtles. Yeah, you're right. I haven't read a lot of Turtles, but they're very much about the New York sewers and New York. But it's like nothing from DC is about New York. Eisner stuff. Oh, there's it.
Yeah.
I just finished reading Dropsy Avenue. That's as New York as it gets.
Yeah.
He wrote a lot.
800-pound gorilla on us all of a sudden. I was like, oh, yeah.
Right. That's yeah. Give the second arc a try. I've been enjoying it. It's just so weird though. Don't expect it to be like the first arc. That's for sure. Yeah, Eisner. I'm trying to think. He likes it. Dropsy Avenue is as New York as it gets. But there's got to be more. I just can't think of it right now.
Oh, I'm sure there are, but was New York
Box Office Poison.
Even though it took place there, was New York really much of a character in the Fantastic Four?
No.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say so.
Too. Yeah.
Have you guys ever read Box Office Poison by Alex Robinson?
I've read articles about it, but I've never
always wanting to pick it up.
It's very good. It's very much about being young in New York in the 90s.
Okay.
So it's one of those comics it's not necessarily about New York, but it's a product of living in New York. Kind of because everybody's living in Brooklyn, commuting to Manhattan,
right?
And if I haven't read it in years, I'm gonna have to reread it. But it started out about being about one character and switched over to being about another character. So it did a very kind of New York thing when certain people are very important in your life in New York, but then they stop being, and other people. Oh, there's a good one right there. Omega the Unknown by Steve Gerber, set in that was in Hell's Kitchen too, I think. But that was also very New York because it had a lot to do with that was in Hell's Kitchen before Frank Miller's Daredevil was in Hell's Kitchen. But that was a lot about living in a rundown neighborhood, a crime-filled kind of rundown neighborhood. Was the thing having stories on Yancey Street? Yeah, that was supposed to be Delancey Street, I think. But I don't know. The thing was, he was definitely the most New York part of the Fantastic Four.
But then they go to Atlantis, they go to outer space. They go like
there were probably certain stories that were New York-ish, but overall they weren't that New York-ish. I'll think of some others.
Damage Control.
I've never read Damage Control.
It's funny. It's cute.
I'm gonna have to write these down on a list someday because the New York songs, New York comics.
Lots of movies about New York.
Joe Kubert's Jewish Gangster was set in a New York neighborhood. Oh, I don't know if I ever read that one.
I haven't read it.
I don't know that one at all. I'll have to look that one up. Look it up. But yeah, that's a topic I've never thought about before. New York comic books.
I guess Joe Kubert probably would have been a perfect guy to do a comic adaptation of the Tarzan Goes to New York movie.
There you go. I think because so many comic books are superhero dominated that there's not, and DC was the king of superheroes for decades. That made there's not. I wonder how many of those 50s crime comics were New York centric. Like crime doesn't pay.
Don't.
I have no idea.
I might be wrong, but imagine you could take a lot of those crime comics and put them in any major city, and they would work out well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I imagine you could, but did they? Were they crime? Were there crime comics specific to New York?
No,
Were they just?
I don't think so.
Were they just from? I don't know. I've never read Crime Does Not, even though there's a lot of issues of it.
The only crime story I can think of that's actually related to Los Angeles is Mulholland Drive.
Yeah. Oh, the Confidential.
Or yeah, that.
What's the name? L.A. Confidential.
Right.
But there's actually an EC comic. I have one of the EC comics mentions. I think it was a crime comic. Mentions the train station that used to be in my town.
Okay.
So that was definitely a New York story. I'm gonna have to go look up which one that was. But they mentioned the old Haverstraw train station because I said before that people who live in New York City don't even know we exist here. That's because when Robert Moses built the highways, he tore up the passenger trains on the east side of the Hudson. And so we don't have any passenger trains on our side of the Hudson anymore. The west side of the Hudson. The east side of the Hudson, the Westchester side, still has passenger trains. The west side of the Hudson, the Rockland County side, does not have passenger trains anymore. They're world's busiest freight line, but no passenger trains. So I just remember when I was surprised to see a guy stop at the Haverstraw. The train station is actually still there. It's been like a law office my whole life because the train tracks still run by it. The freight trains run by it. I was like, wow, Haverstraw train station. Look at that. So there's at least one EC story that's New York City centric. I don't know about it. Have you guys read a lot of those EC crime stories?
No.
I read a few, but not a lot of them.
I wonder if there's someone out there who's an expert on crime comics of the 50s who can tell us if they were New York-centric crime comics.
Right.
Yeah, there have been tons of movies and TV shows that are New York.
Oh my God, there's so many.
Endless amounts.
So many.
From Seinfeld,
Woody Allen
Friends.
alone,
Yeah, Woody Allen made there's a genre of Woody Allen New York stories. So there's no shortage of them. But I think there actually is a shortage for the comics industry being centered in New York City for 75 years. There really is a shortage of New York-centric comics. I mean, Marvel Comics took place in New York City for some time for Marvel's, since the 60s. But even so, like Fantastic Four isn't really about New York. The Hulk isn't about the Avengers have been centered in New York, but New York City doesn't play much of a part in Avengers stories.
Doctor Strange too.
Doctor Strange too is, Spider-Man is probably the most New York centric.
Yeah, everybody else is a metropolitan hero. No, Sin City.
Yeah.
It just always reminded me of Vegas because that's his nickname, but it doesn't really have anything to do with
Sin City is just it's an amalgam of all these different cities kind of cobbled together in a noir format.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Sleepy here, but I really haven't sampled that many crime comics because they're not easy to get.
Right.
Chaykin's Hey Kids comics is it very much is, but I think that's just because it's for the comics industry. It's more a comics industry comic than a New York City comic. Right. But since the comics industry is in New York City, it's a New York City comic.
By default.
I thought Sin City is LA. Yeah, maybe it's both. Could be. Nick, I've never read NYX, that one.
Yeah.
But there's really
it's an X-Men title.
Yeah. I only know that because it's the first Wolverine's daughter one, right?
Is it?
Isn't NYX number 3 a key issue?
Can't remember.
Well, no.
I think so. I've seen it on YouTube enough times.
Well, here's a question, since we're all ignorant Americans here in this regard. Can you think of any British comics that are not focused somewhere in London or near London?
I can't even think of many British comics. I mean, most of them are sci-fi.
Yeah, and the sci-fi ones tend to be somewhere in North America.
Yeah, even Judge Dredd is in North America.
Right.
Yeah.
Judge Dredd's the entire eastern seaboard all in one big sprawl. Yeah.
Garth travels a lot, but is not centered in any particular city. War comics are in World War II.
Yeah, Judge Dredd was a giant urban sprawl between New York City down the eastern seaboard.
Yeah, I don't even think you would say it's a New York City comic. It's definitely an American
giant
city
mega
comic.
complex of different cities
Right.
all in one area.
Mega City 1 is the entire East Coast, just about. From like Boston to the Carolinas.
V for Vendetta is mostly in London, but it's not a London-centric comic per se.
Right.
I think London is a bit of a character in V for Vendetta, though. It's very English, at least, which makes it very London. And I agree with Sleety here in that Judge Dredd every now and then reminds you with a map that Mega City 1 is the East Coast of the United States, but as I'm reading the story, it never strikes me.
Right.
It
League
does
of
not seem
Extraordinary
to be.
Gentlemen. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is pretty much London, Victoria. Although it's
some other cities too. It's in Paris and the one in Venice.
Yeah, but
From Hell.
Yeah, that's good. From Hell is fully London. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember, what was I reading? I was reading Battler Britain or something like that. It was a series from a few years ago, a revival of one of the English series. I can't remember who wrote it. It may have been Garth Ennis.
It was Garth Ennis.
It was Garth Ennis.
But there was a little editorial in issue 1 that talked about how much he liked Battler Britain, and he mentioned a lot of British comics that he enjoyed. But he said something about, we here in the UK don't seem to have the same respect for old comics that Americans do, in that it's very hard to get a hold of them. There's not a lot of collections of older British stuff. And I think that's why we don't know a lot of, I specifically, probably you guys, don't know a lot of old British comics. They're just not available, especially over here in the USA.
And they didn't record their history in the same way. It's practically impossible to know the names of any of the creators involved in 60s and 70s comics. There was a time when they were farming out the art production to Spain. And we know that because the Spaniards kept records.
I don't think the Spirit was New York City. Well, it was didn't have its own town name.
Yeah.
Wildwood.
It was, yeah. But I think they were. Spirit didn't. Sometimes it would strike me New York City-ish from some of the maybe it was just the Will Eisner drawing and writing that made me think it was New York City. But I think it was more universal. Central City. Yeah, I think
Wildwood Cemetery.
It was Central City. Okay, yeah. Because I always thought the Spirit was sort of a smaller Wildwood Cemetery. Yeah.
Right. And I guess you could argue, is Gotham City an analog of New York City or is it an analog of Chicago?
Oh, it's New York City. New York City's nickname was Gotham City. It's New York City, no doubt.
Yeah, the joke is that Metropolis is New York City during the day, and Gotham is New York City at night.
Yeah, Metropolis is uptown Manhattan, and Gotham is downtown Manhattan.
So where's Stark supposed to be?
But being that Gotham was a nickname for New York
Right.
City long before Batman,
Right.
we know.
In Metropolis, the more technologic it became, the less Cleveland it became.
Yeah. I always thought of Metropolis as Chicago, but they say it was Manhattan. Yeah. And Manhattan has all A's in it. Just to let you know, it's an easy way to remember how to spell Manhattan. No E's, all A's. I always point that out to. I've seen Manhattan natives who put an E in Manhattan somewhere, and I'm like, no, all A's. Easy to remember. No E's to be found in Manhattan because you want to put an E in it.
Yeah,
you don't think anything can be spelled with that many A's and no E's.
You can walk up to the guy and say, "What? You call yourself a New Yorker? You can't even spell Manhattan? Get out of here!"
Yeah.
Thank you, Bugs Bunny.
I certainly don't expect everybody to know how to spell Manhattan. But if you live in Manhattan, I've known people who lived in Manhattan who didn't know it was all A's. Like I said, even if you're a bad speller, from now on, you'll remember that one. All A's. Metropolis is in Missouri now because of Smallville. I've seen maps of like DC, and they just do all. I've seen them have like Gotham in Jersey, like where Jersey City or Hoboken is.
Yeah.
On the other side of the river from Manhattan. So who knows? Whoop! Hold on.
And Metropolis is past New Rochelle on its way to Connecticut, I think. Sometimes.
I almost put Sleepy Reader in timeout trying to click on him there.
Yeah,
the New York accent is actually good for people with Latin ancestry.
I like Saul Garnell's comment, dip thongs suck. Well, that depends on what you dip your thongs in.
Like I said, my favorite part of the John Byrne reboot is still the blizzard and Kansas that kept them from going to town for 5 months.
I knew you were going to bring that up. Yeah.
I have to every time.
Yes.
Every time.
But then that gets like our comics fans bad at geography as the general U.S. populace is.
No one. I'm like the only one I ever heard even question that too. I'm like, how come
But I always have a hard time trying where I'm going to place Latveria and Simcaria in Europe.
See, I have such a bad idea of what Central or Eastern Europe looks like in my mind that I can put Latveria anywhere. Well, I don't even know. If you were to show me a map of Central and Eastern Europe and ask me to name the countries, I would bet I get 25% of them right. So I could put Latveria anywhere.
The only place I sometimes think I need to put it between Switzerland and Austria, but then it doesn't make sense because I need to put it between Austria and Hungary.
Well, Jared, you could just retrofit everything and call it the Ottoman Empire, and you'd be okay.
Yeah. And I've actually looked at maps and tried to memorize where all the countries in Central and Eastern Europe are. And I've done it for brief times. And I know now I wouldn't be able.
Well, it isn't difficult to imagine that Latveria and Simcaria can fit anywhere. We actually have a real country which was never absorbed by a larger one, but was part of the Holy Roman Empire, which is Liechtenstein.
Okay.
Liechtenstein is too small to be a country, but there was a time when Germany was not a country. The place that was called Germany was a bunch of small territories within larger territories. Yeah, the maps changed every year. You couldn't keep it straight.
And there wasn't a Poland for like 200 years. It's like there was a Poland, and then it became something else, and other empires, and there was a Poland again. And we think they're gonna. We've read they're gonna print their trades through Dark Horse in Substack. Well, no one knows what's happening right now. It's seen comic artists put mountain ranges in Wisconsin and in Maine. Those artists have never been to the U.S. I guess he's putting Latvia near Estonia.
No, you're thinking of Latvian. It's not. It can't be the same thing. The way that they've portrayed Latvian language, it seems to have a very large German superstrate, but with some Latin substrate. And in order to do that, it has to be relatively geographically close to Romansh, which is Switzerland's native language that doesn't exist anywhere else.
Closer to Hungary and Bulgaria?
No. I need to put it somewhere around Austria, but not further than Hungary, where it bordered Austria.
So more Germanic than Slavic.
Yeah. I can put Sincaria somewhere between the Czech Republic and Austria.
How many imaginary European countries are there in Marvel Universe? I don't know. I know Latvia is the only one I can think of off the top of my head, but I haven't read Marvel Comics. Oh, they do with that X-Men island, right? What's the name of that island? All the mutants. What was that?
Oh, Krakoa.
Krakoa
is in an undisclosed location in the Pacific Ocean. Although they relocated to Mars.
But hold on, that's the one that's a mutant. I'm talking the one that they made a mutant. That's like out in the Atlantic Ocean somewhere.
Yeah, it's like near Scotland, isn't it?
What, Muir Island? It's off the coast of Scotland.
No, not Muir Island. What's the name of it?
Utopia Island. No, Utopia Island was off the coast. It was off San Francisco.
No. There's one in the big island. I haven't read it in so long, but there's an island that they had a big mini series over. I thought it was in the Atlantic, off the Africa somewhere.
Genosha.
Genosha, that's it. That's what I'm thinking of. That's
Wisconsin.
But I don't think that would be a fake European country. Yeah, Krakoa is the Madripoor. That's another one.
Madripoor, which is right across Singapore. Genosha is somewhere between Madagascar, the Comoro Islands, and Mayotte.
I think it's easy. I think Marvel discovered it's easier to invent an island than a European country.
Yeah, trying to do a map of Central America is impossible. They make up so many Latin American countries.
No, it would be funny. You're right. They have. I wonder. They have made up a lot, especially in the I remember one of the first Jack Kirby Captain America comics I read was The Swine. Oh, Sokovia. That's right. The Sokovia Accords.
Sokovia is fairly new, and I can't place it on a map. Slovenia, the one that was destroyed by Ultron. Here's the thing: Latveria sounds like Latvia, but it's further down south. Well, so Slovenia sounds like Slovenia, but it's further up north. Slovenia is actually in the Baltic, even though it's named after an Adriatic country. And Latvia is the other way around.
Is where Wundagore Mountain is. Okay.
Yeah, and Wundagore Mountain's not real.
Surprised there's not a fictional Marvel Middle Eastern country that's called Stan.
What?
So I'm surprised there's not a fictional Marvel Middle Eastern country that's called Stan.
Stan.
Sandstand, yeah.
What
is there?
Crap, I just lost my thought. Oh, well. I had something to say. Oh, no, this was my thought. Imagine wouldn't it be funny if Marvel made up a U.S. state?
Yes, it would.
For the heck of it. Keep making up islands in European countries. Why not just make up a new state?
What would you call it?
I don't know. Stan versus Jack Stan.
I mean, there's a long history in literature of fictional places being created. It seems to me like, I could be wrong, but like the one fictional U.S. state that pops into mind for me is called Arcadia, and I can't remember where that comes from.
That's Louisiana. That's what they call some places down near New Orleans, I think. But we can cut off part of East Texas and make it another state. Call it another state. We can call it Arcadia. The part of Texas, the part of East Texas and Louisiana, we'll cut out a little piece there and call it Arcadia.
But you know the old phrase says, "Don't mess with Texas." So.
Oh, well, one of my favorite cartoons I ever made was in my message tee. I had a person standing there with a "I heart messing with Texas" shirt. That was one of my message tee messages. And I use that every now and then on the internet. Call Mark Miller for his Old Man Logan math.
My favorite one now is there's a very famous flag that was used. It's the "Don't Tread on Me" symbol.
Right.
There's a mongoose that has the snake in its mouth and said, "I'll tread wherever I damn well want to."
Arcadia. Yeah, we'll make a new state, Arcadia. East Texas and Louisiana. We'll see if we can get someone to write it into a Marvel comic and say, hey, we make up European countries all the time.
It sounds to me like the word Arcadia would either be near Maine or it would be somewhere.
I think it's near Louisiana. I'm not 100% sure.
It's funny.
Texas will soon be at war with New York.
Have an association with them.
That's why Hawaii has no snakes, all the mongooses.
Well, on Arcadia, do we need some that sounds vaguely Native American?
Texas is too far away to be at war with New York. Those Texans don't like to leave Texas.
And to be honest, New York's not going to care if you're at war with them or not. They're not even going to acknowledge your existence.
Yeah. I can see a bunch of Texans riding up to New York in their pickup trucks. Yeah, we're going to show them New York is what for. And the New Yorkers, get out of here.
And then the rest of the state, we got just as many hillbillies and pickup trucks as Texas.
Yeah.
All you have to do is go out of New York State, out of New York City area, and you got hillbillies with guns in their trucks, just like Texas.
There's New York City and there's New York.
Yeah. Wasn't Arcadia the name of Captain Harlock's ship?
Yeah, it was the name of Captain Harlock's ship.
There's a new French Captain Harlock comic.
That just seems so odd that a Captain Harlock comic, a new one, wouldn't be Japanese.
Well, the French guy's a big fan.
Right.
I saw him interviewed by a Brazilian YouTuber who only talks about European comics.
Ah. What are the big hot comics in Europe this week?
I have no idea. Here's the thing. France puts out about 100 new graphic novels every week.
Wow.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Wow. That is a lot. That is a lot. How many U.S. comics do you think are put in? Not graphic novels, just a comic book a week.
Only Panini still publishing comics. These are trade paperbacks now. And everything else can only be published by trade paperbacks. If they were magazines, they wouldn't get published because they'd have to be distributed in newsstands.
I saw.
Oh yeah, France has a ton of money.
I saw an article just yesterday. It stated that one of the upcoming months, October, November, December, is going to have 53 different Batman titles.
Ridiculous. Yeah, I can buy European comics in the Fnac mega stores, and there are 3 comic book shops that that have French comics there.
Arcadia
One of those
was
has a Spanish and Italian comics too.
Arcadia was an old Greek province, perfect for our fake state down near Texas.
Arcadia, capital New Sparta. There, we have it. No, capital Peloponnese, biggest city New Sparta.
That reminds me. Oh my goodness, I forgot about that comic.
What's up?
It was written by David Lapham. I forget who drew it. I think it was called Sparta. Came out, I don't know, it must be 5 years ago now. I'll have to walk over to my shelf and see if I got it there. And it was like a post-apocalyptic story. You know, the government had collapsed. But it took place it might have been Colorado. It was a city in the mountains, I remember. And their whole sort of government was based around high school football. There was sort of this bread and circuses atmosphere.
Right.
And as long as the government was delivering good high school football, everything was right with the world. And it was one of the weirdest things I've ever read.
So much for the separation of church and state there, because in a lot of places, high school football is a lot like a religion.
Yeah. In Texas, as we were mentioning before.
Pennsylvania.
Not so much in New York State.
Politics by college football. This is madness.
I'm going to walk over. Where is it?
You were supposed to answer, no, this is Sparta.
This is
That is obvious. Yeah.
I can't find. I don't know if that's the exact name of it. It's not in its spot if it is. But Friday Night Lights is real in Texas. Yeah, I have certainly heard that.
Friday Night Lights is real in a lot of places, not just Texas.
Yeah. My high school was the number one football high school in New York State, and no one really cared.
Right.
Because high school football, just because we have all the pro teams, so high school football just no one really cared.
Right.
And the reason we were number one in New York State is because I went to such a big high school. You know, my high school had 3,500 students. So that's way bigger than most high schools around here.
Yeah. The high school I went to, when I was going there, it had grades 8 through 12. 10 through 12, like a lot of high schools do. 502 students for all 5 grades put together.
Wow. One of my friends from my college days, her high school graduating class, where was she from? Andes, New York. Her graduating class was 8 people.
Wow,
that's a small high school. I think her school was like K through 12.
Yeah, there's private schools that usually have bigger classes than that.
Yeah.
Now, my freshman biology course was 500 people in it. So, no, but they begged me to. They begged me to play high school football. I just didn't have any interest in it. I played basketball, but I didn't play football.
Well, you can imagine a school. My graduating class was around 650. You can imagine, a high school with a graduating class of 650 can easily outcompete a high school with a graduating class of 100 in a football game.
Right.
That's just a numbers game.
Yeah.
Yeah, the highest paid person at many big colleges is the football. Yeah, it makes them the most money.
By a large margin in most cases. Rare exceptions, because you have ACC colleges where you have the basketball coach as the highest paid coach instead of football. But,
They get the biggest TV ratings.
Yeah.
High school. I have one more comic. Radiant Black, issue number 7. Now we're back to the main story. Last issue was a side story starring, I think, this woman here. No, she pink or red. And the first issue, this guy found this floating ball. He touched it. It gave him this Power Ranger suit. And he and his buddy trying to figure out what to do with this Power Ranger suit. They run into this girl in a red Power Ranger suit eventually who's robbing banks, and they try to stop her. Eventually, the guy in the Radiant Black fights the girl in the pink Power Ranger suit and ends up nearly dead. He's in the hospital right now. And the suit just went to his friend. So it's like we changed main characters in like issue 3. And now his buddy has got the Radiant Black suit, and he wants to kick the ass of the girl who put his friend in the hospital, who might never wake up again.
Right.
But then some giant alien who looks like the Merc from Nexus shows up and says, you got to fight this guy who's going to destroy all of Earth. So now in this issue, they're fighting this guy who's going to destroy all of Earth. And it was a pretty fun issue. Lots of fun artwork. It's sometimes difficult to tell the fight apart when there's so many characters in these suits that are similar.
Right.
And the suits change at times. But I'm enjoying it. Oh, look, it's a wraparound cover. Kind of. Just the ground wraps around. But I've been enjoying this series. Kind of straightforward, superhero-ish, but not really, because he's... I don't know, what would you call a story with a superhero guy who's not really doing superheroics? He's fighting battles with a guy who wants to destroy the Earth. Would that still be a superhero story?
It's shonen.
It's what?
Shonen.
Shonen?
Yeah, like shonen manga.
Okay, I'm not that familiar with shonen manga, so
shonen is for young adolescent boys who like to watch fights. Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball isn't a superhero comic. It's a fight comic, but they act like they're heroes and villains, even though the heroes don't protect anything, and they end up being as destructive as the villains.
Okay. I don't think
what you just described is professional wrestling.
I don't think I've ever considered that before. Shonen.
Well, yeah, Vegeta did a face turn.
Yeah, because I back in the early 2000s in the Marvel bullpen, what Dragon Ball Z, the anime, was so huge amongst. I never watched it. But there were guys there who would talk all day about who would win in a fight between Dragon Ball Z characters.
I am familiar with the concept of people talking all day about Dragon Ball.
No, I didn't get it. I'm just like, really? This is what you guys talk?
Yeah.
It's the equivalent, like who would win in a fight between Hulk and the Thor. I mean,
yes, but we were in the Marvel bullpen, and if we talked all day about who would win in the fight, Marvel or Hulk or Thor, everybody would think we were crazy.
Right.
The guys who were talking all day about who would win in a fight, Goku or is the only name I remember, someone else, didn't think that was crazy. That's what I found crazy.
Yeah. Well, I didn't watch Dragon Ball, but I knew everything about it because all my schoolmates at high school would insist on talking to each other about the entirety of every episode. So of course I knew what was going on. So I started making fun of them. Did Planet Namek explode already?
When I was a
Vegeta and Goku both leave craters. Yeah.
Jared, do you remember the TV show that came on in the late 70s with Robert Conrad that's called Black Sheep Squadron?
Yep.
Okay. When I was a little kid in second grade, if you didn't watch that episode that week, you were out of the conversation at school for the entire rest of the week until the next episode came on.
Yep.
So we had a lot of little kids that knew a lot about World War II fighter planes talking about them all the freaking time, driving everybody else crazy.
People can talk sports all day, but then you get the game and you can see who was right and who was wrong. People talking who would win in a fight, Goku or Vegeta, I don't even know how to say that name, where there's never any resolution, or the resolution is whatever the writer decides, is a totally different thing. I think is a totally different form of crazy.
Yeah.
Especially if you're talking about it like it's real. We talked about Saturday morning and Monday when we were kids. Yeah. It's one thing to talk about who would win in a fight. I don't know, Batman or Superman, as sort of as if you were going to write a comic. Well, if I were to write, that's another thing to talk about them as if they were real people.
Yeah.
Because it's all talk is meaningless when you get down to it. We have to give meaning to things, but I don't like to be as reductive as all talk is meaningless. I mean, I don't begrudge these guys talking about who would win in a fight, Goku or whoever, all day. I just find it baffling because there's I can talk all day about I don't know, word origins.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, that's not a speculative subject. To me, that's an interesting, the history of words and where this word came, I can even talk about where Latvia or Latveria might be in Europe.
Right.
I can figure out clues and this and that. But in the end, it's not anywhere. But to endlessly talk about, it's also like there was in the early 90s when wrestling was huge. There was one guy, Dave Sharp, still a letterer in comics. Everybody who liked to talk wrestling would come up and talk to Dave about it because Dave was a wrestling fan. And you'd hear the same conversation 3 times every Monday until Steve Bunch had to yell at him and tell him he was only allowed to have that conversation once. And if he wanted to talk about wrestling, he had to leave his desk to talk about wrestling. Because Bunch could not hear the same conversation 3 times every Monday.
Yeah, that would get a little old after a while.
But there were some people who'd come over and talk about wrestling, and they'd be into it, but they'd know it's a show.
Yeah.
And there were some people who'd come over and talk about wrestling, and it was as real to them as any real thing out there.
And there's an awful lot of parallels between professional wrestling and superhero comics.
Some topics are more meaningful. Well, we give things meaning too.
Right.
I always say meaning is humanity's gift to the universe. Because without us, there is no meaning. A rock doesn't care about a tree.
You mean our gift to the universe is not Yoko Ono?
No.
Okay.
And you know what? I stopped making fun of Yoko Ono after listening to the Stern Show.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, they used to make fun of Yoko Ono and still do.
Yeah.
But so many female musicians love Yoko Ono. And they love Yoko Ono because she went out there and did her thing and didn't care what anyone had to say. And that wasn't happening in pop music much before Yoko Ono. If you were female in pop music, you had to walk certain paths. And she blew things wide open for a lot of people who came after her, and they appreciated it. So after hearing that, I kind of stopped making fun of Yoko Ono and saying, you know what? I'll find another punchline for my jokes about bad singing.
Bjork.
It was, if we as a planet gave up on sports and are putting attention money to space travel, yeah, well, that's a dream.
Yeah, but then we get to Mars, and what are we going to do?
Yeah.
At least if we played sports, we could build a stadium on Mars, and we could watch sports there.
What you're going to do is you're going to mine minerals, and you're going to instantly become the richest corporation in the history of humanity. Like that.
Mm-hmm.
The first company that can figure out how to successfully mine asteroids for minerals is going to own the rest of the Earth like that.
Or collapse the market. One or the other.
And well, it'll be like the De Beers Mining Company.
Yeah.
Keeping diamonds artificially high.
East Indian Trading Company, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We'd make war like normal people. Yeah, on Mars.
Yes.
That always happened. Well,
I have settled on the North Pole of Mars. I cannot bear that the people who settled on the South Pole of Mars are stealing our resources all the way over there.
And that's going to happen.
Well, on that note, it's about time we wrapped up and said goodnight for the evening and let Paolo get to bed. Even though he's going to be up 24 hours, according to his name.
No. That will be tomorrow. The 24 hours of Le Mans this weekend. It starts tomorrow at 4 p.m. Central European Time, which is 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And the race will last for 24 hours. And we already know that Toyota is going to win.
Okay. And Sleepy, you don't have to transport the minerals. You transport the asteroid that they're on. Alan doesn't need sleep. Keep going.
Oh, I definitely need sleep now. I need about 6 hours of sleep. Otherwise, I get irritated more than usual.
Me too. All right, so you guys have a good night out there. And we will catch you next time.
Bye-bye.